All right. Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast on this Wednesday, April 20th edition. This should be great. Today is the recruiting episode. John Garcia Jr. is going to come on to talk quarterback, so we should have fun with that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the quarterback competition and kind of tell you what's going on real quick before we get into that long interview. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I am your host, Stephen Willis. Thank you very much for tuning in from the basement of the palatial Central Florida studios. We're here to talk to you about Ole Miss sports and what is really on the mind of Ole Miss fans going on. And what's on the mind is it is Grove Bowl week and also recruiting. So this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're expecting for the Grove Bowl and the quarterback competition as a whole. And we're going to talk a little bit about recruiting. So tune in for that. So thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Do us a favor. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications every time we release a new video, which is actually fairly often. And, of course, upvote the video itself. It should be pretty awesome. What's going on? I'm going to say awesome over and over again because it is awesome. So, the big news out of yesterday was Lane Kiffin acknowledging that the quarterback competition, no decision will be made until fall. And I, on Twitter, put out like a gif of somebody like feigning shocked. It was like, oh, like that. Because at the end of the day, there wasn't going to be a winner named in the spring. There's probably not going to be a winner named until Labor Day. And I mean, that's just what it is for two reasons. One, Lane Kiffin doesn't want to give the other team, whoever they're playing throughout the season, a head start on being able to prepare for which its style of quarterback is the quarterback at Ole Miss. There should always be a little bit of air of indecision when it comes to that because it's two different quarterbacks. You want that. Second of all, if it is, in fact, Jaxson Dart would have been the winner and you announce it, Luke Altmyer is gone. He would have been at Florida State before you could shake a stick at him. But as it stands now, they're going to come in and they're going to start the fall. They're really going to compete, at least in the beginning of the fall, because there's a chance that a player as fall practice hits the transfer portal because that's the new era of college football that we reside in. Again, I am going to take this quarterback controversy seriously. I'm going to take Lane Kiffin at his word. Now, others are not. Others are going to assume. Others are going to do this. Everybody's going to do some kind of false logic without really understanding what's going on to say Jaxson Dart is just guaranteed and rubber stamped. Now, Jaxson Dart might, in the end, win this job. He's got all the tools in the world, super strong arm, got to get his turnovers in control, got to do a little bit less Brett Favre, but there's a very good chance. We said that even before this quarterback competition started, he had a 60% chance of winning the job. Now, I mean, that is a good place to be at. But going into the Grove Bowl this weekend, this is what we need to see. And I talked about this yesterday, so I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it again probably tomorrow. I want to see Luke Altmyer go downfield, and I want to see him take chances with the ball. It's not what he's necessarily done. He's been very machine-like, very efficient through spring camp, hitting the backs and the tight ends and short routes and just methodically working it down the field. Now, with Zach Evans as a running back, that may be the type of offense that you need. You need somebody that's going to protect the ball and methodically move the team down the field. That's fine. Jaxson Dart, this is what I want to see from him. I want to see him take on and be hyper efficient, hit the checkdowns, finish this Grove Bowl 13 for 17. Even if it's for 70 yards, that's what I want to see. And I don't care who they play with because the same receivers are going to be available for one as they are for the other. And I just want to see the offense get run in a manner that's kind of the opposite of their spring practice reputation at this point. That's what I want to see. And I don't care who wins. I don't care if interception's thrown by Luke Altmyer. I want to see the next step made in their development. And this game is the perfect opportunity to make that step, because you're going out in front of fans. Many times people are going to see you for the first time. There's going to be a little bit of nerves, especially from a high-profile transfer coming here from Southern California. And then on the other hand, you've got Luke Altmyer, who is competing for the starting job. It's a big deal. It is a really big deal. And it is important that they take that in stride, control the emotions, and not rely on that muscle memory that has gotten him. That's the point of this. Luke Altmyer, this muscle memory through spring, is very efficient, very decision-making, very robotic, check downs. I want to see him get out of his comfort zone a little bit. Because both of these quarterbacks, if they do this and have success doing it, it'll become something that's like, oh, okay. And that's another tool they can put in their chest. It's something a little bit different. Jaxson Dart and Luke Altmyer are both set to be true sophomores in the fall. Right now they're freshmen. And because of that, expect them to have development pains. Remember when I said these guys have a chance to be Matt Corral, but it's the Matt Corral in 2019 that they have a chance to be right now. They're not going to be the Matt Corral of 2021. They're not going to be that guy, because they have to develop into him, and they can eventually get there, but they're going to have to develop. But it's going to be a lot of fun in the spring game this year, and I'm really, really looking forward to see. All the way down to the offensive line. Well, I think we might talk about them. I don't know what we're going to talk about the second segment in this show, because it's going to be a really, really short one. It's kind of like what are we doing type segment. But should be a lot of fun. This is the time of year when I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. This year I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are their first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious and all new flavors that are coming out all the time. That's a lot of alls. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It'll be delicious, and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they know they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and they figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. So here's the offer. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So hit us up on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications when new videos go up, and of course, upvote the video itself. And if we hit 1,000 subscribers before football season, we'll be doing a live, interactive post-game show following every Ole Miss game. Should be a lot of fun this football season. I can't wait to do it. Might be coming from the basement of the Palatial Central Florida studios. I don't know. We still have some work to go, so be patient with that. But also, I have a big announcement starting on Thursday, April 28th. Tune in to Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineups of experts and insiders. I think I'm scheduled to come on day 2. And for all of those dying to know who your team will take, catch Audacity and Locked On NFL's mock draft special, hosted by Brian Peacock and former scout Matt Williamson of the Peacock and Williamson TV show, or NFL show, all week leading up to the first pick. Now, for the Locked On NFL Draft Live, you can go to the Locked On NFL Draft YouTube page. For the Audacity NFL Mock Draft, you can hit the Audacity and Locked On NFL Draft podcast feeds. For the Locked On NFL Draft Live, you can go April 28th, April 29th, and April 30th. And Audacity NFL Mock Draft is going pretty much right now. You can catch it right now. It'll also air on the 25th. So that'll be the Locked On NFL Draft Live and the Audacity NFL Mock Draft. So this is what we're doing. First of all, we are in negotiations right now to have another platform carrying our stuff in another way you can watch our show. So stay tuned about that. We're going to announce it a little bit later on, but it should be cool. It's like we're all growing in time for football season and everything going on. Also, John Garcia Jr. coming on. You'll catch him in a couple of minutes talking all about recruiting. We're going to have him as a weekly guest on this show. I asked, do you want it weekly? Do you want it bi-weekly? And everybody's like, we want it weekly. So we are going to try to do that. That goes with Kara McCutcheon, Tom Vanderford, Derek Vandegrift, and when we bring on Bill Flowers, which we're going to try and do next week to talk about spring practice as well. So we got a lot of stuff building up on the channel, and we have a lot of guests that we all value their perspectives, because that's what it is. The more information we get about a situation, the more knowledgeable we are about what actually is going on. There's too much of this, I believe this, now everything else is against this. No, that's not the way this works. I need to find out whether or not our quarterback is what we need it to be. And somebody else talking about our quarterback and somebody else talking about our quarterback, completely different walks of life, and eventually you'll get to that consensus of exactly where that quarterback is. That's our goal. It's all perspectives. That's the reason we don't do the news stuff and the fake news stuff and anything like that. We're all about talking about the surrounding area around Ole Miss fandom. That's what we want to do. We want to talk about things surrounding Ole Miss fandom. But in a minute, we're going to talk to John Garcia, mainly quarterbacks. I think we're going to hit on Dante Dowdle as well. So it should be a lot of fun right after this message from rockauto.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand in their warehouse that they happen to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So you can save time and money with rockauto.com. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and the Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On, as 2 words, in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review. You can say whatever you want to. Just give us a 5-star review. That would be greatly appreciated. And remember, if we get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers by football season, we'll be doing a live post-game show that you can participate in. I'm here today with John Garcia Jr. We're going to talk a little recruiting. How you doing, John?
I'm doing well. Always excited to talk recruiting in the SEC. I mean, it gets no better, really. So let's do it.
Yeah, and I understand that Ole Miss is kind of in a weird position when it comes to recruiting, because it's not 2008 anymore. I always say that all the time. But they hit the transfer portal really, really hard, so they're very selective on high school players. So we're going to start out with quarterbacks that they are looking at, and we're going to start with Arch Manning because, of course. What are you hearing on Arch right now? What's the latest?
The latest is kind of the same. It's a really slow and steady process for the Manning camp. I think they've made that obvious to just about every single school that they're looking at. And that's the beauty of recruiting, because how long do you wait on a potential generational quarterback, certainly from a marketing standpoint, relative to the rest of the quarterback class, which is really loaded in this class of 2023. It's a great year to need a quarterback recruit from the high school ranks. But Manning most recently, of course, visited Virginia, where he does have about as many family ties as any school not named Ole Miss, of course. And everyone still kind of puts this top three in line for Manning, whether it's Alabama, Georgia, or Texas. Ole Miss kind of factors in somewhere thereafter. They have not been officially eliminated by the Manning camp. But if you watch what Ole Miss is doing on the recruiting trail, and I know we'll talk about it, Ole Miss has sort of moved on from Arch Manning in terms of targeting other prospects and prioritizing other prospects of late. So it's really fascinating to see not only where the Manning dynamic takes their visits, but also how the schools are approaching recruiting Manning, knowing that, one, his timeline is kind of infinite, and two, he's never really going to come out with a list of top schools. So you have to really approach it very carefully, and it's quite the unique story no matter how you look at it, relative to most kids who are all over social media blowing everybody up about their top schools. So it's going to be fascinating. We do think Ole Miss is still a factor. We're just not sure how strong of a factor the Rebels are today relative to some of those others.
Now, from what I've seen, he didn't take part in the Elite 11 this year. Is there anything to take away from that?
It's just how the Manning camp has operated. You know, he hasn't done any camps, any combines. They had a regional in Baton Rouge, so, 45 minutes or so from his hometown, and he didn't show up for it. It's just, he's going to be the most coveted kid we've ever covered that doesn't participate in these national showcase events. Now, there's still time for him to get to another regional and maybe make the finals this summer. But again, the Manning camp is keeping everything pretty lock and key with his recruitment and where he shows up to perform. Outside of Newman's basketball games or maybe the Manning Passing Academy, we're not going to see a whole lot of him this spring outside of the Isidore Newman walls.
Yeah, and I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to call you out for that, but Arch's recruitment, the reason I'm not willing to just concede that he's not going to end up at Ole Miss is because his recruitment is mirroring Eli's almost eerily. Even with Texas and Virginia in the finals. Now, we got Georgia and Alabama floating around in this one, but it's kind of an eerie thing, and I don't want to discount it. I'm not – and people that put a savior tag on him, if you're – like there's a group of Ole Miss fans that think he's a savior tag. Ole Miss doesn't need a savior. You're going to have a quarterback with Lane Kiffin as a coach, and it's just a weird situation, especially from the Ole Miss background with Arch Manning.
Yeah, we've never really seen anything like this from a modern recruiting standpoint, especially with how close to the vest everything has been in this recruitment. And, our guys at SI have talked to Eli about it. They've talked to Peyton and Archie about it. And you get three different approaches, but they all fly similarly under that, we're going to let him do his own thing kind of radar. And obviously that means anything goes in this recruitment, which is, to me, an indication that it could go longer than we conventionally see quarterbacks going. It's usually this time of year where quarterbacks are ready to wrap things up. I've seen 4 or 5 come off the board in the last 10 days to Power 5 schools, but Manning is going to be unique and go against the grain in just about all fronts, including with this timeline. So, yeah, everybody's still in it except for the schools that have already picked up quarterbacks. That's about as tangible info as we're going to get as to who's playing those musical chairs.
Yeah, and the one question I had with this recruitment, it didn't really necessarily matter where he ends up. I just didn't want Lane Kiffin to get caught with his pants down to where he's scrambling around signing day and he didn't end up getting a quarterback because he put all of his eggs in one basket. But it doesn't look like that is happening. And Jaden Rashada out of California is like, I think the on-3 metric is RPM and whatever that means to him. And it looks like Ole Miss has a little bit of a lead currently in that one.
They're right in it. He's been busy taking visits. He was at Miami a few weeks ago, Arkansas this past weekend. I believe he's going back to Oregon for a little Pac-12 love for the Ducks for that visit. But he does say he wants to get back to Ole Miss, and I think that's what's unique about this recruitment. We all know what Lane Kiffin covets at the position, but if you look geographically, California kids, West Coast kids are really right in his wheelhouse. And Rashada's already taken multiple trips to Oxford, wants to take at least one more before a decision comes in. So depending on when you talk to Rashada, you might get an Ole Miss feel, or you might get a Miami or Oregon feel. I really think it's those three at this point, but there's no indication that he's ready to shut it down soon. So I do expect him to visit Ole Miss one more time before he pulls the trigger. And obviously he knows what Lane Kiffin has done with California quarterbacks in particular, looks up to Matt Corral, has a bit of a relationship with him as well as a fellow Californian, which never hurts on the recruiting trail. And he understands that Ole Miss has sort of moved on to a degree from this Arch Manning recruitment. And he does feel like a priority at Ole Miss, which is important because every school wants to recruit more than one quarterback, and making all of them feel like priorities is a really big deal in the recruiting game. But Ole Miss is definitely right there with Rashada.
Yeah. To people that might not know much about Jaden Rashada, describe what type of quarterback he is. Give us a comp.
Well, he's a big physical passer, 6'5", about 180 pounds or so, just has a rocket right arm, quiet confidence about his game. Maybe a Justin Herbert, not to put him in the Oregon box, but maybe a Justin Herbert comp physically, where you see a big arm on a tall and slender kid at the high school level, and you just wonder how much he can physically develop at the next level. But there is some solid mobility there as well. Saw him in person in Dallas a few weeks ago and was just wowed by the control he had playing some 7-on-7 ball with a bunch of receivers he'd never played with before. And you would never know it watching them because he just has this gravitational pull that kids were buying into immediately. So I think he's got the personality to play in the SEC, to compete with quarterbacks in a quarterback room over the long haul, which is, again, a hard thing to find on the recruiting trail these days, where a lot of these kids want to come in and play right away.
Yeah, I looked at his highlights going back and doing some research on him, and the ball just pops out of his hand. I mean, it's actually quite impressive, and I don't even think you saw that with Matt Corral. I mean, this kid has a really strong, fast twitch, I would say, throwing motion with the football.
Especially for his size, that's what makes it so rare. 6'5" kid, you think of a long wind up mechanically. Typically, it takes a bit longer to figure things out. But to have a quick trigger at 6'5" already as a junior going into his senior year of high school says a lot about a kid like that. You know, he's had to wait his turn at his high school. COVID really was hard on the West Coast kids in particular in terms of shortening or extending their seasons earlier in their career. So he's paid his dues. He's back on the West Coast. And again, this kid's got a huge arm, as you mentioned. Easy third-level velocity, which is not something we say about many quarterbacks at the high school level.
Yeah, he looks pretty good. Now we're going to move on to a quarterback that many people might not know about, Marcel Reed. I think he goes to NBA in Nashville. Tell us a little bit about him and what we can expect there, because my understanding is if for some reason Manning and Rashada falls through, if they put the full court press on Reed, they can probably get him.
Yeah, Reed has been to campus many times, but he's a totally different quarterback. That's why it's so fascinating. I think you mentioned Matt Corral in high school. Yeah, we thought he had a nice arm, but he was really more of a runner, an athlete playing the position that you wanted to see develop. And I think Marcel Reed fits that mold to a degree. I mean, a kid who's a very, very strong athlete, good runner at the quarterback position. I think he had as many rushing touchdowns as passing touchdowns in 2021, but he's got experience out the wazoo, and that's what you really like at the position. You know, I think we get lost sometimes in the physical with quarterbacks, but in terms of getting guys into position and being experienced in a modern offense, I mean, he's going to be like a 4-year starter at the high school level, and that's why he blew up so early. You know, I think 3 or 4 years ago, he started picking up all of the SEC offers, and now it's only a select group still in the race for Marcel. And I think Arkansas is probably the primary competition for Reed, but you know, they might get a commit next week from another prospect. So I think that could bode very well for Ole Miss, as you mentioned, Stephen, if things do fall through with Rashada and or Manning, or if Lane Kiffin decides, hey, maybe this is the year I take 2 quarterbacks in one class, which is not easy to do, but something that Lane Kiffin has done before. He was obviously the coach who brought Tua Tagovailoa and Mac Jones to Alabama in the same cycle, which is near impossible to do in terms of getting two different personality types on the field and in the fold together. And I think Lane Kiffin's done it before, and he might try to do it again. So Marcel Reed is absolutely a name to know.
All right, and it's comp time again with Marcel Reed. Tell me what type of quarterback he is. Give us a comparison.
Yeah, I think he's one that's equally as impressive as a runner as he is as a passer. I think maybe an Emory Jones, to keep it in the SEC, where you see the physical tools, but you also see that athleticism, and it becomes very intriguing as to which way and which direction his game is going to go. You know, he's got a good frame at 6'1", 6'2", near the 200-pound mark, so he's got room to be physically bigger than Emory Jones at the same stage, but I do see good arm talent as well as that raw athleticism to package thereafter. And we know in Ole Miss's system with heavy RPO and decision making, that is incredibly important at the quarterback position. So I'm a big fan of Marcel Reed. I think you can't substitute the experience that he has, and that's why he's kind of the sneaky recruiting quarterback prospect that a lot of these schools are keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and I think NBA is kind of like that. Way back when I worked at Rivals, way back when, I was out covering a high school game, and there was this little freshman running back at NBA, and all of a sudden he just was tearing, I think might have been Innsworth, it might have been Brentwood, just tearing them apart. And he finds out it was Ty Chandler. And just 4 years of that developed into Tennessee and into North Carolina. And I think that NBA and the high school level just kind of slowly develops you as you go. They kind of want that. That's like the baseball team that every 3 years they can hit the 11.7 at a high level. So they try to build to that year. So that's kind of what NBA does. And I really like their facilities. I like what they're doing. And, Nashville, is a great town. But we're going to go to Picayune, Mississippi next with Dante Dowdle. He is rumored to make a decision in the coming weeks. He's a running back. He ran for like 2,800 yards last year. And from what I saw, looking at the highlights, I didn't see top-end speed. I saw lateral quickness, and I saw excellent vision, and I saw an extremely physical runner. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. And the kid is listed at 6'1", 205 or so. He's probably closer to 215 these days. So he plays in a no-nonsense, old-school offense, and he runs with that reflective style where he is one cut and go. And as you mentioned, extremely physical. You can just watch the tape and see back seven defenders make business decisions not to engage with him up high. They want to shoot for his legs, and he's got enough subtle quickness to break some of those long runs because of his north-south style. So I think you can substitute top-end speed with decisiveness and efficiency as a running back, something that Ole Miss has had over the last few years with a couple of different running backs. And I think that's another misconception with the Rebels. They want to run the football. This is something that has always been a part of Lane Kiffin, particularly the last few stops that he's had. And they need a physical running attack to keep that defense honest. You think of the RPO scheme, it's really an A-gap, B-gap kind of scheme. There's not a lot of room for wasted movement. There's not a lot of room for a lack of decisiveness, and that's not something you're going to get with Dowdle. And I think that's where the fit at Ole Miss, beyond him being an in-state recruit, really does come into play, and they're going to be right in the thick of it. He's coming back into town this weekend for the spring game, for the Grove Bowl, and then he's going to take a couple more trips and then shut it down and make a commitment in May. So you got to feel good about where you're at if you're an Ole Miss fan, and we know Lane Kiffin and company are going to get top skilled prospects. So when they lock in on a prospect in state like this, it's hard to beat them.
Yeah, and the comp for him that I saw, honestly, Snoop Connor. That's kind of what he looked like. That's how he kind of is going to fit in the offense. That's what I saw. Am I wrong?
I like that. That's a much more modern comp. Mine was Chris Warren. I was taking it back to the 90s, like Seattle Seahawks with the big elbow pads, just running with a high base and a high gait. But yeah, Snoop Connor runs that same way. And it's like, yeah, he's not going to go for 80 yards, but you keep watching and it's 7, it's 8, it's 12, it's 15. And in the fourth quarter and or short yardage, it's money. That nose for the end zone is something we do see on tape with Dowdle. So I love that Snoop Connor comp, especially if he ends up at Ole Miss, because you need your thunder and lightning variance kind of guys in the backfield, and there's a lot of smaller, shiftier backs in the fold already. So you need that big hammer. You need that big power back who's going to keep a defense honest and help enhance that RPO game. So I love that comp.
And also, since all the transfer portal happened, just can you let everybody know what Ole Miss is getting with Zach Evans?
Oh my goodness, this is the quintessential modern running back, a kid who's incredibly comfortable in space and starting from a staggered stance. You know, it's 2022, right? You're receiving the football in different ways as a running back. We mentioned with the RPO game, you've got to be able to play as well laterally as you do vertically. And that's where Zach Evans and his twitch and his quickness really show up. But then you look at the kid, and he's over 200 pounds. He's comfortable out of the backfield, and he does have that top-end speed that can take it 80 yards. I mean, I think he averaged over 5 yards a carry at TCU when all they could do was run the football the last couple of years. So he's not going to have that same type of defensive approach in the SEC West against the Lane Kiffin offense. People are going to be a little bit more inclined to back off and play zone and play a gap scheme defensively. So that's where Zach Evans can really thrive. I mean, he's a true three-down back in the modern sense. And if he can stay away from the injuries, I mean, he could be an all-SEC performer or maybe even more. He could develop into the focal point of the entire offense if things break the right way. I mean, he's got NFL Sunday potential, and I think that's something that obviously was really coveted in the portal, and that's why it was such a big get for Kiffin and company.
All right. And now, through the grapevine, have you heard anything specific, anything that I'm forgetting to ask about Ole Miss?
Not really. Dowdle's the big spring game visitor, but a lot of in-state kids will, of course, be on campus this weekend for the Grove Bowl. I mean, and I think that says a lot. You know, there's a lot of big-time spring games this weekend. LSU, Notre Dame. I mean, the list really goes on and on. Oregon. So to get a big group on campus like we're expecting Ole Miss to get says a lot, because these kids really do have a choice this coming weekend. So I'm wondering if some commitments might come through, or if we look back in a few weeks and say, hey, 3, 4, 5 of those kids that were on campus ended up picking Ole Miss again, which says a lot because they're being very selective, as you mentioned, in high school recruiting because they've been so darn good in the transfer portal. So I would keep an eye on what happens this weekend. And as always, keep an eye on those quarterbacks. That's really going to be the difference between what's maybe considered a slow start in recruiting versus things getting out of hand and picking up volume very quickly once you get that quarterback on board. And depending on who it is, it could happen sooner rather than later.
All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Tomorrow we'll have Kara McCutcheon and talk about Ole Miss in general. Now make the second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and wherever you get your podcasts. John, thank you very much for doing this. I look forward to talking to you many times in the future. I think we're going to move on to the O-line maybe next time. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, let's talk about those big guys. Anytime, Steven. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Likewise.